Hey, good day, folks. Welcome to another episode of Andrew's Life. On this video, I'm going to be giving you guys a brief tour of the city of Indianapolis, Indiana. And during this tour, I'm going to kind of break down how I feel about Indianapolis and what parts of Indianapolis are ideal places for you to live if you're going to live in Indianapolis. And the way things are going to go is, like right now, I'm on the far southeast side of Indianapolis. In a minute here, I'll be getting into the core of the city. So this video is going to start by me jogging through the southeast side of Indianapolis. Then after I leave, this is southeast side of Indianapolis. And then after this, I'm going to be jogging through downtown. Then I'm going to be on the northwest side of Indianapolis. Then I'm going to go back into being downtown. And then I'm going to end the video by driving down Meridian, which I'll be headed towards the far northwest side of Indianapolis, going towards Carmel. So let's start the video. Now, as many of you guys may realize, Indianapolis has received a lot of negative publicity over the years due to the uptick in crime going on in the city, and also due to the deterioration of other communities. Of certain parts of the city. Now, I would say Indianapolis is a lot like most other American cities these days. You got some communities that are decent. You got some communities that are so and so. You got other communities that are so far gone that it seems that there's never going to be any return for those communities. And of course, you do have a fair amount of gentrification going on as well. Now, I've done plenty of videos of Indianapolis. I've done different parts of this city. So feel free to go on this channel and check all those videos out. In fact, earlier today, I drove through the historic district, and I also drove through northeast Indianapolis. So feel free to check all those videos out. So basically, when it comes to living in Indianapolis, there's a lot of people out here that would say that Indianapolis is a lost cause and it is a bad place to live. If you move here, then the probability of you becoming a victim of a crime is going to be extremely high. And there's people that would even suggest that per capita, the crime rate here in Indianapolis is actually higher than Chicago, which it is. However, there's a lot of, I'm going to go ahead and break down Indianapolis a little bit here. Now, let's start off with a little bit of history about myself. Now, back in 2010, I was living in Toledo, Ohio during the tail end of the last recession. At that time, I was working a part-time job at Walmart. Making a long story short, I lost that job. I got terminated because me and the supervisor did not see eye to eye on nothing. I was working at that time as an assembler. I assembled bicycles, furniture, and toys. Before I had that job, I was working as a apartment maintenance person for a large subsidized housing community in Savannah Township, which is located west of Toledo. There's like 13 of us. All 13 of us lost our jobs because the owner of that community decided that he didn't need 13 people maintaining those apartments, so he let all of us go, and he decided to hire 5 people instead. So we all lost our jobs, we all got pink slips, and I would say maybe a couple of weeks after that, I got a call from Walmart. Now, remind you, I didn't think Walmart was going to call at the time because I didn't submit an application to Walmart. Like, I don't know, it's been like maybe a couple of months prior. So during that time, I kept on looking for work, and I finally got a job as apartment maintenance. And I stayed at that job for 3 months. So I was going to do that job full time, and I was going to do Walmart part time to stack some money real fast and quick, because my money was fairly low. So anyhow, I lost the job as an apartment maintenance person, got a job at Walmart, and I lasted at Walmart for about a couple of months before I lost that job due to me and my supervisor not getting along. And, at this point, I'm going to be honest with you people. I didn't really care about that job. I'm going to keep it real, because at this point, I no longer was interested in residing in Toledo. I just simply did not like living in Toledo. I didn't like the neighborhood, and to be quite frank, I didn't care for the city. So before I lost my job, I have already made plans of what I was going to do if I did lose a job. So obviously I lost the job, and what I had planned in my head, I put it all to action. At the time, I was driving a Chevy Cavalier. I decided to load up a few pieces of nice clothes for job interviews so I can go somewhere else and look for work. I had a few canned goods for meal. I had I had peanut butter. I had me some peanut butter. I had some crackers. I had cans of chicken and tuna for my meals. And I had some bottled water. So I loaded up my car with this stuff, and I headed here to Indianapolis. I had a good friend in Tennessee at the time that used to live in Indianapolis, and they told me that the economy here was relatively solid. Housing here was cheap at the time. You know what? I didn't have anything to lose, so I went on ahead and came here to Indiana to potentially start a new life. So once I got here, once I first got here, I think it was late afternoon. It was on a Sunday, so I got here and I immediately parked at a hotel parking lot. I grabbed myself a bite to eat, and once I ate, I went on ahead. Now, mind you, this was back in the dark ages before smartphones were really a thing. So I went on ahead, grabbed the local newspaper, looked at the want ads. I grabbed back when they used to have those flyers with different employers on it. I grabbed up a few of those and looked at some of the opportunities that were available at that time here in Indianapolis. And the next day, I decided to treat myself to a breakfast at Bob Evans with a gift certificate that I had from one of my old jobs back when I lived in Tennessee. So I had a meal at Bob Evans, and then I went over to the library to see what other opportunities were available. I began to submit resumes and online applications. And I would say, every day I was going to at least one job interview. And this went on for 2 weeks. Hold up. No, this went on for a month. Because it took me about a month. It took me, I'm trying to think it, 2 weeks for a month. Can't remember straight. Well, it took me about a couple of weeks. I think it took me a couple of weeks to get the job. And then once I got the job, it took about a week and a half longer for them to run my background and drug tests. Because I got a job working for this medical facility as a custodian. So given the type of place I was working, they did a drug test, they did background and all that good stuff. So from the time I came here when I first came here to Indiana, to the time that I began work, it was around a month, give or take, that it took me to get all that situated. So I began working. And at this time, and mind you, I didn't have a place to stay. I was living out my car, because the bulk of my money at this time was tied into my house that I had up in Toledo. So I would say shortly after I began work, I would say a month after I began my new job, I finally get an offer on my house up in Toledo. And then a couple of weeks or so after that, I had to go up there to get all my stuff out and to attend closing, because at that point I was getting ready to sell my house because I accepted the offer and everything. So I was super happy to sell this house, to get my money, and to not have to look after a house anymore, and to be able to look at the city of Toledo through my rearview mirror. I was so happy. I was excited. In fact, I stopped off at one of my favorite restaurants in the Toledo area, which was, it was in Oregon, which was east of Toledo. I stopped off there, grabbed me a little bite to eat at my favorite restaurant, and then I headed west back here to Indiana. And when I got back here, the very first day that I had off, after I received the money from the sale of my house, I began to go out here and look for an apartment. So I finally found me an apartment which was located in northwest Indianapolis. It was Turtle Creek North, located across from St. Vincent off of 86, northwest side of Indianapolis, the far northwest side. And I lived there for 3 years before I decided to go back to purchasing homes again. So I lived there for 3 years, left there, and then I decided to move up to Anderson. So anyhow, that's my little history of Indianapolis. I was here for 3 years. I lived on the far northwest side of the city. Now, during my time in Indianapolis, I have driven all over this city. Because before I decided to move to Anderson, I first drove all over the city to look for houses around here. in Indianapolis. But at the time, there was nothing I wanted to buy. Either A, I didn't like the neighborhood, or B, I didn't like the house, or C, I couldn't find anything at the time that was within my price range. So that's why I decided to move to Anderson. So as far as Indianapolis is concerned, I mean, honestly, as I've told you guys many times before, I don't consider myself to be a city person. I am more of a small city person. But, you know, I mean, for those of you that desire to reside in Indianapolis, I would say if you're going to live in the core of Indianapolis, my suggestion would be to live either A, there's like some condominium, I mean, and this is assuming that you got the money, of course, because this suggestion is going to be relatively pricey. Now, throughout downtown Indianapolis, you're going to find different neighborhoods that have been gentrified within the last 10 years or so. You're going to also find condominium communities throughout downtown. And then and also there's the historic district as well, which is right by downtown here, which I did a video of the historic district earlier today, so go check it out. So I would say if you're gonna live in the core of Indianapolis, I would say if you got the money, check out the downtown area. You have a lot of nice condominiums around here. You also have a lot of recently gentrified communities here as well. You also got the historic district. Now I will say, and this might be a bit controversial, but you know, downtown Indianapolis is not always the safest bet. I mean, there has been several issues recently of businesses being broke into and being robbed, of people being victimized. Like, you know, there's been recent stories of people having their wallets snatched, women having their purses snatched, cars being broke into, you know, crap like that. So I would say if you're going to live around here, definitely Cary. I advise you to Cary. Definitely. Now, other parts of Indianapolis that are decent is you can check out Broad Ripple. Now, Broad Ripple, for the most part, is a fairly decent part of Indianapolis. I got that video on this channel as well, so feel free to go check out those videos. Now I want to say maybe several months ago there was a shooting in Broad Ripple, but those type of crimes typically don't happen on a regular basis out there. So that's another community you can go check out, which is relatively nice and safe, is Broad Ripple. And again, it's going to be a bit pricey up there. I would say to live in Broad Ripple, I would say you're gonna have to have at least $300,000 to put on a house. If you're gonna live downtown Indianapolis, downtown here, I would say you're gonna need at least, I don't know, maybe I'm a little high, but I'm gonna say around here you're gonna need at least $350,000 for a house. So you can live downtown. There's Broad Ripple. So yeah, I would say if you're gonna live in the core of Indiana, and another, yeah, there's Ball Ripple, and there's also a lot of communities. And again, these options I'm giving you are pricey, but there's also community like off of Meridian Street, which you guys will see in a little bit here. There's several neighborhoods off of Meridian where you got bigger houses. You got a lot of manicured yards. Now, I would say to live in those, I would say to live in that neighborhood, you're probably looking at every bit $400,000+. That's another part of Indianapolis that's nice, or a lot of the neighborhoods off of Meridian. That's one. Now that is one of those type. Now that's one of those areas that within the last 15 years has been heavily gentrified, but nevertheless, it's a nice area to live today. And off the top of my head, those are the only places that I would suggest anyone to live if looking to live in the core of Indianapolis. Now, as far as other Indianapolis communities that are more so on the outskirts, now another good place to live in Indianapolis is going to be anywhere on the far north end of Indianapolis, rather it be northeast Indianapolis, like going towards Castleton, or be the far northwest side of Indianapolis, such as where I used to live, off, like around, 86, Michigan, going towards Carmel. I mean, any community off around that area is decent. Another place that I would consider to be decent would be, I would say, if you look in the far south side of Indianapolis, going towards Greenwood and Southport. That's another part of Indianapolis that's fairly decent. And then there's the far southwest side of Indianapolis, which is going towards Canby. That part of Indianapolis is not bad. And then there's Canby itself. Now, Canby, I guess depending on what set of data you look at, Canby might be considered a city of its own, but there's other pieces of data that suggest that Canby is really a community within the city limits of Indianapolis. Now, Canby has a separate county, though. I mean, Canby is located in, I forgot the name of the county that Canby is in, but it's not in Marion County. It's weird. But anyhow, when it comes to Canby, Indiana, which is kind of sort of within the city limits of Indianapolis, depending on what set of data that you look at. Now, I mean, in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of Canby. I mean, for one, it's too crowded. And secondly, not so long ago, there were a couple of events that happened in Canby. Like there was, I want to say about a year and a half or so ago. Right, like if you're driving down 67, if you're driving down 67, whether you're driving north from Mooresville or you're driving south from Indianapolis, there's a neighborhood, I forgot the exact name of the street, but there's a neighborhood that's around the Aberdeen apartment community I mean, this neighborhood is by the Aberdeen apartment community, and it's real close to the Myers. But this neighborhood off around there that someone had there's someone that I believe had a home break-in. I think it was either a home break-in or a shootout. It is one of those two things that happened around that area. I mean, feel free to go look it up. It happened about a year and a half ago. Oh, and there was also an incident in one of the plazas. Like, I can't think of the name of the street, but in Canby, there's a Anytime Fitness gym in Canby, and then I want to say right by the Anytime Fitness gym, there's a jewelry store. I don't know if that store is still there, but at the time, right by Anytime Fitness, there was a jewelry store. And that jewelry store got robbed. And that also happened about a year and a half or so ago. So there's been a few things that has happened in Canby that aren't good. So I would say when it comes to Canby, I'm not gonna say that all of Canby is bad. I mean, honestly, when you compare Canby to many parts of Indianapolis, Canby is not that bad. Now, personally, if I were to live in Canby, and by the way, I did a couple of videos of Canby, so feel free to check that video out too on this channel. But when it comes to living in Canby, I personally would live in the older part of Canby. Now, if you're driving on 67, let's say you're driving 67 south. When you approach Canby Street, if you make a turn to your left, you'll enter in the newer part of Canby. Or if you stay on 67 and head straight south, you'll run into the newer part of Canby. That's where a lot of your businesses are going to be at. That's where you'll run into many of your cookie cutter communities and condominiums and apartment complexes and all that. Now, that's the part of Canby that I personally wouldn't want to live. Now, if you go the other way on Canby Street, like you go towards the right, you'll run into the older part of Canby. I mean, that's where you'll see. That's going to be the more countrified part of Canby. Now, personally, that would be the part of Canby that I would prefer to live if I were to live in Canby. So Canby, depending on where you live, would be okay as well if you're going to live in anywhere within the greater Indianapolis area. So let's see, we got the far southwest side of Indianapolis, we got Canby, we got the far north part of Indianapolis, whether it be northeast or northwest, going towards northeast, going towards Castleton, northwest going towards Carmel and Fishers. Well, no, northwest going towards Carmel and northeast going towards Castleton, yeah. So yeah, I mean, basically those are the sections of Indianapolis that I would suggest people to move to if looking to move to Indianapolis. Now, granted, those choices I just mentioned, yes, they're going to be pricey. I mean, I would say to live in any of those communities. Let me think here. I would say to live in any of those communities, you're going to probably need to have the ability to drop $300,000 on a house. Now I know for a lot of you that's an awful lot of money. It is for me, which is why when I lived here in Indiana, I lived in Anderson, not Indianapolis. Because in Anderson, I was able to get way more bang for the buck than I would have received in Indianapolis. So I would say, so I guess in a nutshell, I would say if you have at least $300,000 to purchase a house, or for those of you that are looking just to pay rent, I mean, depending on, I mean, I would say if you're a single person and you're just looking for a studio apartment, I would say if you have at least $700 for monthly rent, assuming that you're a single person looking to live in a studio, or if you got a family and you need maybe a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom, I would say at that point, if you have at least maybe, I don't know, $1,200 or $1,300 to spend for rent, I could be a little low on those numbers, but I'll just say $1,200 to $1,300 to spend for rent. If you're looking for maybe a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, I would say if you got money like that, then you ought to be able to find a decent neighborhood here in Indianapolis to reside. But if you're one of these people that, you're like me, you're cheap, you're frugal, you don't want to pay $300,000+ for a house, then I would say for you, Indianapolis is most likely not going to be your city. Because I would say with this current housing market, if you're planning on paying much lower than $300,000, I mean, you're not going to necessarily end up in the projects, but you might end up in a community that would be very close to the hood, or very close to a project. I mean, like for me, whenever I buy a house, I prefer to have a larger lot. I prefer my neighbors to not be super close to me. Like these houses that I'm driving by right now. I used to live in an area very similar to this up in Anderson. And honestly, I did not care to have my neighbors that close to me. You can reach out your window and damn near touch the side of their house. I did not care for that type of a setup. I don't care for that at all. So I would say maybe if you don't mind a setup to where your houses are real close to each other, except the area be, decent, better than this one, of course. I mean, maybe at that point you might be able to grab up something for around a couple $100,000. I mean, these houses I'm driving around right now, just off the top of my head, you're probably not going to be able to get any. You're probably not going to be able to buy any of these for much lower than $100,000. And as far as it goes for rent, you're probably not going to get away with paying anything much lower than maybe $900 a month. And then you got these houses, these are fairly new. I think these are for sale. If these are for sale, you're probably not going to get any of these for anything lower than $300,000. see here. So even in some of these neighborhoods, there's definitely signs of gentrification, or some people might say that's a sign of improvement in the city as far as some of these neighborhoods. So yeah, me personally, I'm not gonna sit here and say that Indianapolis is a complete loss, because it isn't. I will say, I will say that, with the exception of Broad Ripple and the downtown, in the immediate downtown Indianapolis area, to include the historic district, I would say most of the core of Indianapolis are areas that you should probably stay away from, at least for right now. Now, even in the core of this city, there are improvements being made. But personally, if I had to live in Indianapolis, I would want to, at least for now, avoid living in the core of Indianapolis. But that's me. Personally, I would prefer to live like on the outskirts of Indianapolis, such as the northwest part of Indianapolis, or the far southwest, or the far south side of Indianapolis, like going towards, like I said, going towards Southport, or southwest going towards Canby. Alright, folks, I don't know what else to tell you guys. That's all the commentary I have. So I'm going to let you guys finish the rest of this video. Hopefully you got something out of what I said. If you got something to add to the conversation, leave a comment below. As always, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Andrew's Life. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, consider doing that, because I will be putting out a lot more content. So, let's see. So on that note, you guys have a blessed one, and I'll see you on the next one. Hey, kitty.